All right, Mr. D. You know all about those apple tree varieties, don't you?
I do not know. Nobody knows all
Nobody
about
knows
those
all of
apple
them?
tree varieties. There's a lot of them out there. I know that. Simple fact, there's 7,000 apple varieties out there, or over 7,000. There's lots of apple varieties. There are new ones being created every day. They're crossing them, and there are a lot of choices. And when you make a decision about, what varieties you want, I would encourage you to contact your local extension office.
Right.
Or talk with, if you have any successful apple growers around you, talk with them, because I would encourage you to try to find one that's got some disease resistance. You'll be happier if you can find one that's resistant to cedar apple rust. You'll be happier if you find a variety that has some resistance to fire blight and some of the other diseases out there, and that'll make your life a lot easier. No matter what varieties you get, you're going to need to follow a spray schedule, home orchard spray schedule.
Sure. And I'm sure you can get with the extension,
the local
agent.
extension office,
Right.
and get whatever is recommended
Spray
for your
guide.
area. I'm going to tell you what it's probably going to be. I'll tell you what it is for here in Tennessee. It's basically just at bud swell, an oil with Captan. The fungicide. Captan is the fungicide that's going to be mentioned. It's what we recommend in Tennessee. Now, maybe some of the newer varieties or newer fungicides out there have labels for apples, but in our home orchard spray guide, it's still Captan.
Still Captan. Yeah.
And if you have a history of fire blight during bloom, early, mid, late bloom, probably 3 applications of streptomycin or Agristrep 17 or something. That's to combat the fire blight. After bloom, start with your cover spray. 7 to 10 days after that last bloom spray with Captan plus malathion. And so do not use an insecticide during bloom. You don't want to take out your honeybees. But then every 2 weeks, if your spray doesn't get washed off, go with that Captan plus malathion, and that's pretty simple. You can mix it yourself, or you can find it in home orchard spray, a commercial spray. Be careful, do not use a home orchard spray that has carbaryl in it.
Right.
Because carbaryl can cause apples to thin, and sometimes they'll thin them all. Apples are a little different from peaches. They need a certain amount of cool weather. They need a certain number of chill hours.
Right.
And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's do.
Down in the Gulf Coast area where I spent my time, 450 chill hours was about the number of hours. And the chill hours, a simple way of putting it, is pretty much the number of hours below 45 degrees minus the number of hours above 60 degrees that you have in the wintertime. And so you have a lot of above 60-degree weather down in the southern south, and so that's why you get down to like 450 chill hours. I've got a chill hours map that I pulled up from the Penn State.
That's a nice map.
Which is pretty well, you can see in the Orlando area, it's got 0 chill hours, and you get up to up northern part of the Panhandle, South Georgia, South Mississippi has only, 200 to 400 hours, and then it goes on up, and you get up into the Great Lakes area, 1,400 chill hours.
1,400.
And with peaches, each variety will tell you the chill hours required for that variety of peaches. With apples, you don't see that so much. Some of them do have the chill hours. Most of them will simply say they will grow in the USDA zone 6, 5, 8, or whatever. And so you need to be familiar with USDA zones, growing zones, and then just select your apples based upon that.
So what happens if you try to grow an apple in the wrong chilling zone?
There are several things that could happen. The worst thing that could happen is it could die. If it doesn't get enough chill hours, the apple tree just won't survive. If it's too low chill hours, it will bud out early and it'll freeze. The freeze will kill it. if it's requires too many chilling hours, it will never fruit. It will never, you got to have those hours have to be met before it will fruit, and so it just won't do well.
Right.
At the best, it won't do well. At the worst scenario, it will die.
It will die.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's important to make sure that
It's
we're growing
important
it
to
in
make
the
sure
right
that-
chilling requirement zone.
And that's pretty much true of anything you plant in your landscape. You want something that is adapted to that climate.
I would agree.
And you may have a plant that will grow for a few years, and we talk about them every once in a while. One thing in this area that I see a lot is some of the white pines are beautiful trees that are planted, but they're off-site, and they may grow several years. They may grow 15 years, and then they die. And same thing could happen with an apple tree that's off-site.
Makes sense to me.
It could, if it's close, especially if some years it gets what it needs and some years it doesn't, it may hang on for a while. You may actually get a crop every once in a while, but then it's just not going to do well. It's not going to be dependable.
Let's talk a little bit about the state extension zones.
Yeah, the states, when they recommend varieties, actually vegetables and everything else, they will
Flowers.
many times break down the state of Tennessee is usually West, Middle, and East Tennessee varieties and things that'll do well. And sometimes that's based more on temperature, more on elevation than it is temperature. But I know down in Alabama, when I was down there, it was North, Middle, Central, and Southern Alabama were basically 3 zones. Georgia, they break their state up into like 5 zones, and it's important that you talk with your extension service, your local extension service, to determine, how you're set up. If you're going to use the state zone designations on the varieties that you plant.
Okay.
But I looked at Georgia, I looked at Oregon and Iowa, and there were a few varieties that just kind of showed up everywhere.
Okay.
And I'm going to mention those. And but some of these do not have some of the resistance that I mentioned before. For example, Golden Delicious will grow pretty much from Oregon to central Alabama, central Georgia, and the Delicious apples, Golden and Red Delicious, in high altitude areas, they'll have those prominent lobes on the end of the apple, but when you get into lower elevation areas, they're just as round as a pumpkin. They're very round. They lose those lobes.
Right.
Now that's basically dependent upon the elevation that they're grown in. But Golden Delicious is a really good pollinator. It grows in a lot of places, but it is highly susceptible to cedar apple rust, and it has some susceptibility to fire blight also. You're going to want to spray, but these varieties, I mentioned Golden Delicious, Red Delicious is also on that list, Jonna Gold, Gala, Fuji, and Granny Smith. Those varieties grow pretty much all over the country.
Right. And those are familiar varieties.
And you'll see these in the grocery store.
Very familiar.
When you go in the grocery store, just about anywhere, you'll see those varieties. And I spent 12 years down on the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
And a lot of the apple varieties that do well in most of the country don't do well in extreme southern areas, kind of some of the tropical or subtropical areas. When I started, I pulled up a Florida publication and brought back some old memories, some of the varieties, because the varieties of apples that do well in South Florida and South Alabama, down on the Gulf Coast, and I say South Florida, even the Panhandle of Florida, and southern part of Texas, and places like Southern California even, would be Ein Shamir, Elah, Mayan, Michael, and I don't know whether I'm pronouncing these right or not, Shlomit. They're all Israeli. They're from the Israel varieties, and they do well in the extreme south. In the northern part of Florida, the Panhandle of Florida, and southern Georgia, and southern Alabama, and southern Mississippi, places like that, Anna, Dorset Golden, and Tropic Sweet would probably work for you. Now, all of these varieties that I just mentioned, don't try to grow them up north.
Right.
Don't try to grow them
Don't do that.
much further north than the areas that I mentioned. Let me talk about some of the, I talked about pretty in-depth about some of the varieties that grow in the extreme south. Let me go back a little bit further north. I want to talk about the Northwest a little bit, some of the varieties that are in addition to the varieties that I said would grow pretty much everywhere. And then we'll come down into like the central, the heartland, Iowa. We'll look at some of the varieties that grow there.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
But in looking at Oregon, let's go up in the Northwest. In addition to the apples that I mentioned, the Granny Smith, Fuji, Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, Johnny Golden Gala, Lodi, Early Gold, Akane, Gravenstein, L-Star, Empire, and Newton, and Brayburn are varieties that will work up there in those higher elevation, colder climates. Let's looking at Iowa. A lot of varieties will work in Iowa, and I noticed some of these look very familiar to me, and I'm not gonna read all of these.
They have a lot there.
I got a lot of them, but State Fair, I've heard of that variety. Macintosh is an old variety. My uncle used to grow those in an orchard. That's been in New Bern, Tennessee. Cortland, Freedom, Honey Gold, Jonafree, and Jonathan. I'm sure Jonafree is an offspring of Jonathan. Johnalicious also. Spartan, Empire, Honeycrisp.
Honeycrisp, yeah.
That's a very, very good apple, a very tasty apple. Johnny Gold. But those, Matsu, those are varieties that will work in Iowa. So you can grow apples in most of the country, and they are a lot less trouble to grow than peaches.
Yeah, definitely that.
They're more trouble to grow than blueberries.
Okay.
But
less, than the peaches. And we'll have that information, of course, on our website. We definitely want people to go there and, see where they are and see what they can grow for sure. So we thank you for that good information, Mr. Diaz. Pretty in depth in growing apples, right?
Lots of choices.
Lots of choices. Thank you much. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please click the subscribe button below.